Hello, everyone, and welcome to Elections Daily's coverage of the primary elections in New Jersey. Both Ethan and I have been focusing on these races in detail for quite some time, and we're both very, very excited to come on tonight and cover the elections. We'll be covering the Republican primary for the governorship, which is a four-way race, and we'll be covering a handful of primaries for the Assembly and the Senate that I covered earlier, some of which deal with challenges to incumbents. The real question tonight is, will the party line hold up across most of these races, and to what extent will it hold up? So without further ado, I'll let Ethan introduce himself again.
All right. Hello, I'm Ethan. I help out with the New Jersey election ratings at Elections Daily. And if you've come over from the Virginia stream because all the races there are over by now, hello, welcome. Hope you enjoy here. And yeah, let's get started.
Yep. So far, we will be using the New York Times and Decision Desk for our legislative election results, as well as returns from the New Jersey Globe. At this moment, we can project all uncontested race winners. So Governor Murphy will win the Democratic primary uncontested. Both of the Democrats that had been running for governor in the Democratic primary did not end up making the ballot. And most of the legislative races, meaning the Republican and Democratic candidates for each Senate seat, and the two Republican and Democratic candidates in most cases for the Assembly seats, except the second Republican in the 3rd District, where one did not make the ballot, have now won uncontested. So that leaves our contested primaries, which we'll get to in just a moment. So first off, we'll start with a little bit of the discussion of the gubernatorial primary. New Jersey is usually slow to report results, as Ethan pointed out earlier, so we will be giving it a little bit of time and discussing the races.
Yep.
So starting off with the gubernatorial race, I guess I'll throw it over to Ethan.
All right. Well, as Harrison just mentioned, the Democratic primary for governor is not being contested because Phil Murphy's two challengers were both thrown out by the courts. We might get into that later, but what we will be watching today is the Republican primary, where Jack Ciattarelli, former assemblyman, is expected to win handily, given that he had the line in all the counties that have one. So I think that's like 20 out of 21 of them.
Pretty much Salem County, I believe, is the only county that doesn't have an organization line, since Morris just introduced one this year.
Yeah, again, if you're watching the stream, you probably know what the line is, but just as a refresher, Harrison, do you want to pull up a sample ballot again?
Yeah, sure. So basically, what Ethan's saying about the line is party organization committees that exist in all of the different counties in New Jersey, except Salem at this point, endorse a slate of candidates, and they appear on the ballot in a row together, which effectively makes it difficult to run off the line, which is what we call it when you're in a different column. So all ballots in New Jersey, as you'll see in a second, are done by column. And I'll pull up a sample ballot to show an example for you guys.
Because let's face it, for most people, they probably don't know who most of these candidates are. Even for something like Senate or Assembly, they maybe they know who they are, but otherwise, okay, here is this very convenient, nice line of candidates down my ballots. I'm just gonna check the mark on every single one of them because one, it's a signaling mechanism from the party as if, yeah, vote for these guys. We have them in the same column. Vote for them, and then also they literally right under them the organization that endorsed them, which is usually like Somerset GOP organization or something like that.
Yep. Like right here, you can see the Middlesex County Democratic Organization, and this is a New Brunswick ballot. This is the official county organization of the Democrats in Middlesex, and every county basically has a county organization for each party, and that organization endorses a slate of candidates. So you see they all appear on the official line together. Now, over here, you might see another thing. Democrats of Middlesex County is the organization here, and these candidates are running off of the line, meaning they don't have the official endorsement of the party organization. And since it looks a bit awkward to be one candidate off of the line, normally, especially if it's a candidate for Senate or Assembly or an even higher office, you'll see that they might attempt to bring in candidates to run below them on the line to make them look more credible. For example, when Hersh Singh ran for Senate last year, even though he didn't have the line everywhere in New Jersey, really only in counties like Atlantic, Burlington, and Cape May in the South, he would run with David Richter to essentially make it look a bit more credible. Because if you have more candidates below you, you look a bit more professional.
because otherwise it is a single candidate. You're in what we call ballot Siberia. Like, okay, it's just one candidate. Yeah, we don't need to see that. Just vote the line. There we go.
Yep. So we're going to get the first results in here shortly, but just a brief rundown of the gubernatorial primary field. Jack Ciattarelli is the front runner, a former state assemblyman, as Ethan mentioned. Hirsch Singh is, I guess you could say, the second most famous candidate in the race, if you want to look at it on a front runner status type thing. And both Singh and Rizzo, although Rizzo to a greater extent, have done all right with fundraising, but have not been able to fully compete with Ciattarelli. As for Brian Levin, a former freeholder, he committed to the $5,800 campaign finance limit and therefore has not been able to take in any more than that for his campaign. But both Singh and Rizzo have had their fair share of controversies. Singh, we would be wasting too much time to talk about all the controversies that Hirsch Singh has had, but you can go read about them for yourself if you would like. Philip Rizzo is a pastor. His only controversy really deals with accusations of property tax evasion through his position as a pastor at his church. But we're here to discuss elections. So before we get down to the legislative races, let's talk. We have two new sets of results coming in. We have numbers coming in from Gloucester County, right below Camden, as well as Hunterdon County. Only about 4,500 votes at the moment, according to the New York Times, 2% in. And that effectively gives Jack Ciattarelli the lead with about 57% of the vote. Hirsch Singh in second place with 26.2% of the vote. Phil Rizzo in third place with 12.4%, and Brian Levin in last with 4.4%. But once again, Hunterdon County and Gloucester County reporting so far fairly strong for Ciattarelli. And again, Ciattarelli has the line in every county except Salem, where there is no organization line. How do you feel about these early returns?
Before we get to that, I just want to mention, just to be clear, Hirsch Singh and Phil Rizzo are running as the more Trumpy candidates. They endorse Donald Trump's, the former President Trump's voter fraud accusations. Hirsch Singh
himself has encouraged voter fraud in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And he also claims he has Trump's endorsement, which, to be clear, he does not. Yeah, while Jack Ciattarelli is a relatively moderate conservative who's won before in a relatively blue, well, it's very blue now, but in a relatively blue district. So he has some decent credentials behind him. But yeah, what I take on the current results, I think Jack's going to win this handily. You can't beat the line, and it also looks like the pro-Trump vote, the extremely pro-Trump vote is currently somewhat split between Singh and Rizzo. So if they can't consolidate, they have no chance of winning.
That's honestly something that we expected here. I mean, to begin with, the majority of the vote was kind of expected to go to Ciattarelli anyway. But in my personal opinion, I think that the more conservative element, the more Trump conservative element of candidates in this race, and again, the former president hasn't weighed in on this race. He has not made an endorsement or even indicated that he has favoritism toward a particular candidate. But if Hirsch Singh and Rizzo had united against someone like Ciattarelli and spent the primary campaign focusing on that, that probably would have been more of a formidable matchup for Ciattarelli than this. Because again, the vote could be split. And we're still waiting, but we will probably be getting more results soon. We don't have any results in yet from our legislative races that we're following, and those are very fascinating. But as soon as we start to get results in for those, we'll make sure we run through those races again and give you all the facts you need.
Although I do want to address one of the comments here. Have the Democrats always been in column A in New Jersey? No, actually, the columns are randomized for, I'm pretty sure, most counties, if not all of them. It's just that the call. So no, it's at least if you're talking about the ballot line columns, the ballot line columns are all randomized. Although there's a fun story in Bergen where the Democratic Party always just happened to be in line A, but otherwise no, the columns are randomized. So although you can easily tell which one's the line column because that's the only one that has candidates
all the way down without stopping, essentially.
But yeah.
And again, New Jersey is essentially a machine state, so the line usually does win, and the line usually does win. and the line is usually full of candidates, whereas these other organizations, largely invented by candidates running off the line, sometimes lack credibility and often find it difficult in this state to mount primary challenges that are as successful as challenges in other states.
Yeah. Oh, another thing that contributes to this, I just want to mention, is that New Jersey's requirements to get on the ballot are relatively difficult. You need to get 100 signatures to get on the line for like assembly or Senate, and you need 1,000 signatures for governor. Which, and 100 signatures, it doesn't sound like that much. Well, why don't you try getting that many signatures as independent candidates? So most of the time, it's only people with party organizations backing them that are able to get enough signatures to get on the ballot for things like this. Sometimes in like the off-year elections, like in the the midterms and the presidential elections, they might be able to get some, but like otherwise, for off years, no one really tries.
So we have a question here from Evan Clemson. Do we know whether these are early mail-in or election day votes being reported? So out of about 750,000 ballots mailed out to New Jersey voters, about 27.3% of them have been returned thus far. And if we look at how New Jersey elections have worked in the past, that's a fairly significant amount. So we're going to be looking at those votes, which are being tabulated as we speak, as well as the election day votes that have been cast by voters returning to the polling place in person for the first time, essentially since before the COVID-19 pandemic.
Still nothing in from the places we're watching yet.
Yeah, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about some of our legislative primaries we're watching tonight. So first, we'll start with the state Senate. One of the races we're watching is the Republican primary in the 2nd state Senate district in Atlantic County. And this district is currently held by the Republicans. They flipped it in 2017. And the Republican primary is between Seth Grossman, who was the 2018 Republican nominee for the 2nd congressional district to replace Frank LoBiondo, a race he ultimately lost to Jeff Van Drew, who is now a Republican, and Vince Palestina, a former assemblyman who many Republicans on paper consider the more credible candidate, certainly a more credible fundraiser. And Palestina has been endorsed by the Atlantic County Republican organization. So Republicans are looking for him to be winning that primary tonight. That's going to be an important race. Grossman does have, as Ethan pointed out, the NRA endorsement, which could be quite a significant thing in a Republican primary, although we're not really sure. Oh, it looks like we have some results, so we'll get back to that race in a second. But out of the 16th district, one of the Senate primaries we're following, former Congressman Mike Pappas is beating his opponent, Jeffrey Grant, 60-40 right now in the 16th. And that is going to be the Republican contest to determine which Republican will take on Andrew Zwicker, the assemblyman running for Kit Bateman's seat. It is the most Democratic seat in the legislature, currently represented by a Republican. Kit Bateman retired this year after a narrow race in 2017, and the district's continuing movement to the left. And the winner of this race, regardless of the Republican nominee, will certainly face an uphill battle. Just a little trivia, and I'll throw it to Ethan. Mike Pappas did serve in Congress in the late 90s from this area and famously ruined his House career by singing a rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star based on Kenneth Starr during the Clinton impeachment. And that effectively sunk his congressional campaign from that moment on. And he sank into the abyss and lost.
Yeah. So, Mike Pappas is a one-term congressman from 1996 to 1998. So, So he, and first of all, he's not been in the House that long, and second, that's been like 20 years now.
20 years.
Yeah, it's not
more than 20 years actually.
Yeah, so like he probably still has some name recognition left over, but not much. It's been a long time since he's been in office.
Yeah. So that race is rated likely Democratic at the moment. It is a Biden plus 21.8 seat. And currently it is the only seat that we have projected as a flip in the legislature. But I'll go back to the 2nd District Republican primary. Do you have any thoughts on the Grossman-Palestina primary?
Have we mentioned yet that Palestina was a former assemblyman for this district 12 years ago, he I believe lost a race to the Democrats later, but then he's trying to make a comeback now in the state senate. He has the endorsement of the Atlantic County GOP, which means he has the line. But this would not be the first time Grossman has won off the line, though. He famously did that in 2018, and the GOP promptly abandoned that race, and Jeff Van Drew won that House race for New Jersey 2nd.
Yep. And the race here is also notable because Chris Brown, the incumbent, effectively managed to win and flip what is now a Biden plus 11 district. So the Republicans are really going to be looking at how can we hold this district. And ultimately, if you just look at it from a candidate versus candidate perspective without any controversies or partisan rancor, on paper, Palestina is the more credible candidate in terms of effectiveness and organization.
He does a lot more money. So
yeah, that's the main thing. The candidate who raises the money is going to be the most successful.
Let's say you were to mount a successful challenge to the line, you're gonna need to spend a lot to get your name recognition up enough so that people vote for you on the ballot instead of just seeing the line and vote that person. We haven't seen Seth Grossman spend that much money. He hasn't raised that much money, so I'd say his odds of winning off the line, even with his name recognition in the district, is pretty slim. So yeah. Yep.
I mean, it certainly is hard. And speaking of winning off of the line, two more Democratic primaries to watch. First off, in the 18th district, what we're watching, incumbent Democratic Senator Patrick Deignan is running against incumbent Senator Patrick Deignan is running against Mohan Patel, who works on the Edison School Board and notably was part of the 2017 scandal in which members of the local government sent out campaign mailers that were anti-Muslim. And that racism scandal, we're going to have to see how much that impacts his performance against Patrick Deignan, who took over the seat in 2016. We're also covering the 20th district Democratic primary in a seat that, when you combine minority groups, is a majority minority seat, where incumbent white Democrat Joe Cryan is seeking re-election against Assemblyman Jamal Hawley. And Jamal Hawley has also had his fair share of controversies and is certainly the more progressive candidate in that race. And finally, in the 37th district, one of only 3 retirements this year in the Senate, Loretta Weinberg, the long-term Bergen County Democrat, retired this year, and that has pitted Democrat Gordon Johnson against fellow Assemblywoman Valerie Huddle, who is also the assembly person from that seat. And the two of them are essentially in a feud to determine who will succeed Weinberg. Johnson has the line in the entirety of the district, and Johnson, although he is older, could also benefit from the combined minority coalition votes in that district, which also does have a decently sized minority population. But we're going to have to watch. That is not against an incumbent, but it is another test of the line in a Democratic primary. So do you have any extra comments on those Senate races? We're still waiting on results from those comments.
As someone's noted in the comments, the key thing about Jamal Hawley in the LD20 primary for Democrats is Jamal Hawley is a current assemblyman, and while Joe Cryan is the current senator. Now, the thing is, what Jamal Hawley is most infamously known for is that he's an anti-vaxxer. Now, this was bad before there was a pandemic. And since the pandemic, his criticisms have not let up, and that's in part of why a lot of party officials have all disavowed him. In fact, I'm pretty sure like Joe Cryan had the endorsements of pretty much every major person in the state or something.
Yes, even more so than somebody like Gordon Johnson.
Yeah, they are all out to protect him from this primary because he is a white Democrat and it is a majority minority districts. And Hawley just has decided to bring along a slate of assembly candidates, although one of them, I believe, got criminally charged for not being eligible for the ballot, I think, but that's a separate issue.
Yeah.
So he's spent a decent amount of money. He's running, on paper, a credible primary. I expect Cryan to win easily, though. He's got a lot of money and organizational structure backing him here.
Mm-hmm. And we should note that in these races, I mean, we expect both Johnson and Cryan to win, but ultimately, Jamal Hawley beating Cryan would be a bigger upset than Huddle beating Johnson, in my personal opinion. I mean,
Yes.
Huddle does not have the line or the establishment support of the party regulars like Gordon Johnson, but you can't really compare Huddle to Jamal Hawley if you're looking at which one is more controversial.
In addition, Huddle actually has the support of a lot of progressive organizations.
Exactly. I mean, Hawley is essentially the Democratic version of Hirsch Singh, to put it in a simple way. I mean, both are. You could consider both of them anti-vax, and both of them have at some point either committed or encouraged nefarious voter activities, which is not what you really expect in a political candidate. But regardless, we'll move on to the assembly races because we have some primaries to follow there as well, and we're excited for that. First off, just some small primaries. In the 21st district, we're just making sure that incumbent Nancy Munoz and Michelle Matsakudis both are on the line. Matsakudis is filling Bramnick's spot. Bramnick, the leader of the assembly, is moving up to run for Tom Kaine's vacant Senate seat because Tom Kaine's prepping for another bid for Congress against the embattled incumbent Tom Malinowski. And Jennifer McCarr, a Republican, is running off of the line there. We expect the line to hold up, but we're just being cautious there. The winner in that assembly primary, or the winners, I should say, will face Democrats Elizabeth Granner and Ahmed Mehrotra. In the 39th district, which includes Bergen and Passaic County, we have quite a notable matchup. After Senator Gerald Cardinale died earlier this year, Holly Schupesi and Bob Auth both ran for the state Senate. And ultimately, in a narrow vote, Schupesi was selected over Auth with about 51% of the vote by the Republican organization to be interim senator. Auth decided against challenging Schupesi in the primary, instead running for re-election with Deanne DeFuccio, who was appointed to fill Schupesi's seat. But Schupesi is running with her own slate of legislative candidates, John Azariti Jr. and Jonathan Kirpus, both of whom have been prolific fundraisers, in fact, outraising both new incumbents. So that's one thing to watch there, although, again, as usual, we expect the line to hold up. And the last two assembly races we're really going to be looking at, the 13th, which is based in Monmouth, their incumbent Republican, or one of the incumbent Republicans, Serena DeMasso, kind of made enemies with Sean Golden, who's effectively in charge of the Monmouth County Republican organization, and that resulted in her being dumped from the line. They've given the line to Gerard Scharfenberger, the other assemblyman, and Board of Education, Homedale Board of Education figure Vicki Flynn has taken the other spot on the line there, and that effectively leaves DeMasso out to dry. That is not good news for her. Another embattled incumbent, although not necessarily as in such a hopeless state as DeMasso, is Betty Lou DeCroce, fellow incumbent of Jay Weber in the 26th district, which includes Essex, Morris, and Passaic County. Although the Morris portion is the most electorally significant portion of that district, they're facing off against Christian Barranco, who is running on the line with Jay Weber in Morris, which just introduced its line this year, effectively leaving only Salem County without the line. DeCroce has the line in Passaic and Essex, but the real question here is, with Weber and Barranco having the line in Morris, how much will that damage DeCroce? I mean, DeCroce has knocked on over 20,000 doors, according to the New Jersey Globe. Still confident about Morris County chances. Lives in Parsippany Troy Hills, which is in Morris County. So the real question is, will name recognition and incumbency win, or will the line win, and will Christian Barranco be finding himself the second Republican assembly candidate in a district that is favorable for the Republicans?
Yeah, to go a bit more into some of these races. So since we just talked about LD26, as Harrison just mentioned, Morris just established its line this year and promptly kicked out Betty Lou DeCroce in favor of Christian Barranco. Christian Barranco, to be clear, is not a well-known name. He is a union official for IBEW Local 102. He's an electrician by trade, I think. Now, to be fair, it's a Republican-leaning union, but still, Now, neither of the other two counties in the district consented to this, but because Barranco has has pretty much performed a coup in Moore County, he is probably headed to the assembly. The other race I want to get a bit more into is the 39th district, the circumstances there. So Holly Shapizi, the current state senator, well, she originally she was actually running against Jerry Cardinal in the primary challenge before that when he was still alive. Jerry Cardinal was in his 80s. He's been there for like 40 years or something. And some people in this district were getting restless, and Holly Shapizi decided to step up and ask him and nicely ask him to retire. And at which point he did not, and she decided to what was considered sort of a suicide run by some against him. But turns out, but then he passed away, and because of the connections she made during that primary campaign, she was actually able to narrowly win the convention for the line, and also the seat against Bob Oss, the other incumbent. And as we mentioned, Bob Oss tried to reconcile with Shapizi afterward, but there was clearly some bad blood, a lot of saltiness there. And Shapizi, who came with her own line of assembly candidates, has not rescinded her endorsement of them. And those two have raised and spent quite a bit of money, or at least one of them, as a rowdy.
Mm-hmm.
So
just a few little updates real quick, and then we'll get right back to the discussion. First off, we have results in the gubernatorial primary reporting from Warren County, one of New Jersey's rural northern counties out in the northwestern part of the state, below Sussex. And Jack Ciattarelli, like in Gloucester and Hunterdon County, is winning fairly easily with about 1,200 votes reporting. Ciattarelli has 46.3% of the vote, with Hirsch Singh in second place with 32.2% of the vote. And that updates our national total statewide, although New Jersey could be its own country, to 3% reporting. Ciattarelli, 53.7%, Singh, 27.6%, Phil Rizzo, 13.7%, and Brian Levin at a respectable 5%, which is actually impressive given the fact that he has pretty much had a dearth of fundraising, given the fact that he took the $5,800 limit, and that put him at odds with the other candidates in terms of being able to put himself out there. And then we have some results reported by the New Jersey Globe. The 37th District Senate race, this is that Johnson-Huddle race to succeed Loretta Weinberg in Bergen County. So far, there are about 3,000 votes counted, and Gordon Johnson, who has the line, is leading by a 2-1 margin. And in the 2nd District GOP Senate primary, another one of the big Senate primaries we're watching, this is the vote by mail vote, which is apparently fully counted at this point. The district is entirely within Atlantic County. And Vince Palestina, again, who has the line, has also reportedly won that, according to David Wildstein, by a vote of 904 to 410 over Seth Grossman. So those are two new results updates.
Yep. As usual, the line seems to be holding up here.
It does seem to be holding up.
If you don't mind, I'd also like to mention one other race. It's not the legislature, but it's another important race that's going on today. In Atlantic City, there's actually a Democratic primary to the current mayor there, Marty Small, by a pro-Trump Democrat, Tom Foley. Now, Marty Small, the current incumbent, had the support of the state Democrats, and of Phil Murphy, but Tom Foley has the support of the Atlantic City Democrats. Now, Marty Small has the line, but apparently that's not enough when you're dealing with the local organization. He is leading 600 votes to 555, so surprisingly close.
Just a quick question here. Chris Christie endorsed Jack Ciattarelli in this race. And we also are getting some new results in the gubernatorial race, this time out of Hudson County, which, granted, is not exactly a paradise for Republicans, given its Democratic nature. But again, those are results not reported on the New York Times yet, but Decision Desk is showing Ciattarelli with a respectable lead over Hirsch Singh by about the same margin as he is currently leading in the other counties in Hudson County.
Yep, 398 votes counted. Yep.
We also have a new projection to make in the 1 second here. Let me see if I can type it up on the banner. But we have a projection to make in one of our Senate primaries. In the 24th Senate district, Steve Arojo will win his reelection primary against Mr. Cruz, his Republican primary opponent. This was never really a race that was on the radar, but he's currently leading with 81% of the vote. He has the line in Sussex, and this is a safe Republican district up in the northwest corner. So that is our first projection in a contested primary tonight.
I'm seeing a comment. How can one be a pro-Trump Democrat in regards to Atlantic City? This is a fun outcome of machine politics. You know, when you're, it's like how the machine used to work, like in like the Solid South in places. When your place tends to only elect people of one party, which I suppose isn't that true anymore in Atlantic County, but used to be. So when you only elect Democrats, well, even if you're conservative, you stick with the Democratic line, and you make relationship with other Democrats. And even if you're more conservative, and for Trump, you keep your label, you keep your offices, and yeah, machine politics.
Yep. All right, so we're just currently waiting on more races. Again, the only other legislative race we're watching with results tonight is the results we're currently in for is that Senate primary in the 16th district to determine the Republican nominee that will essentially try and hold Kip Bateman's district. And Mike Pappas is leading Jeffrey Grant 60-40. Pappas does have the line there. And besides that, our only projection, as you can see, is that Steve Arojo will win re-election. He'll win his primary. This is one of the primary challenges that was not really at stake here, but we're projecting it anyway, and he advances to a safe Republican seat that he's expected to hold in November. And we'll have more projections over the course of the night as we get more results, and you can track results being reported on our banner below, including the new results out of the Senate primary in the 16th district.
It seems, I think the New York Times inadvertently still kept Chia Ravalati's name for LD31, if we want to talk about that.
Yeah, so that race is interesting, and I know Ethan has a lot to say about this too. But Chia Ravalati, deputy whip in the assembly, and he was essentially pushed off of the ballot because there's a rule built into. First off, let's get through some of the differences. The 31st district is only one seat, not two in the assembly. Second, Chia Ravalati was pushed off by the Bayonne mayor because the rules there allow the Bayonne mayor to get to choose the nominee for the seat. And the Bayonne mayor chose a crane operator named William Sampson. Now, it is a safe Democratic seat in Hudson County, but it's notable because he was originally going to fight it and run in the primary, but eventually decided to pull out and give in.
Yep, he originally got in himself on due to that rule. So he got in himself because he got the endorsement of the Bayonne mayor. But then they got tired of him, and despite being in Democratic leadership, he is now out. Didn't even try to challenge. Well, he tried to challenge and then gave up.
And we're getting our first results in now from Camden County, where Jack Ciattarelli is currently leading 54.6 to 25 over Hirsch Singh. Again, if we want to look at these margins, Gloucester, he's leading 58 to 27. Camden, he's leading 55 to 25. Hunterdon, 53-25. Warren, 46-32. Overall, these are very consistent margins for Ciattarelli, exactly what we expected going into this race. He's currently at 54.2% statewide. And again, it begs the question, if the more conservative Trump Republicans, if you want to call them that, had run a single candidate, you could be at 46% of the vote right now, and this could be a much more competitive primary, even if they hadn't received the line in any of these counties, theoretically.
Yeah, if they all consolidated behind someone, this might have been able to become competitive. But yeah, they're the clear split where like Hirsch Singh is getting like 2/3 of the anti-Ciattarelli vote, and while Rizzo and Levine are taking the rest of it.
Yep, and there was just another update that actually benefited Hirsch Singh and Phil Rizzo. So Jack Ciattarelli has dropped from 54% to 52.6%, a slight drop there. I guess Hirsch Singh The big thing for Hirsch Singh tonight would be, can I get over 30% of the vote? And can I get Chitterelli under 40% of the vote? Hirsch Singh in the past, at least when he's had the line, has been strong in Atlantic County, Cape May County, Burlington County, all counties that he performed quite well in the Senate primary last year, and has generally been more favorable in, versus counties like Somerset, where, Chitterelli has that foothold because he served in the assembly in a seat that actually was Democratic when he held it. Again, Chitterelli still has the lead, but we're going to keep watching how this race changes.
Yeah. For what it's worth, the seat he used to hold was LD16, the one that currently still has the Republican state senator, and is the one only district we project to flip to the Democrats. So
yep, that is very true, and that's something that's important to mention.
Yeah, it's Central Jersey, so it's the hub of what I like to call the ancestral Republicans in New Jersey. This is the area where you see the most ticket splitting between like the top of the ticket and bottom. So like you all probably know about Tom Malinowski underperforming Biden by like 8 points last year here in his race. But that's an awful performance. However, you should know that like even other candidates, so like Cory Booker also underran Biden by 4 points in New Jersey 7th. But obviously still only half the underperformance of Malinowski. But this is a place where a generic Democrat would always underperform. Combine that with Malinowski running, in my opinion, a poor campaign, and Tom Kean, relative name recognition. His dad was a former very popular governor, headed in the 9/11 Commission, and he himself is a state Senate minority leader. All added together, you get that result. Probably going to become congressman next year.
Yep, certainly a possibility, and we're going to have another projection shortly, so stand by.
Let's see. In the meantime,
real quick, I guess I'll just do the projection. We can project here right off the bat if you want to look at the Assembly District in the 16th. Andrew Zwicker opened up one of these seats by making his bid for Senate in the seat where Kip Bateman caused a vacancy with his retirement. Fellow incumbent Roy Fryman will win. He's currently at 40% and advanced to the general election. And Sadaf Jaffer, who has also received the line there, will be advancing as well to the November general election. So once again, we can project the winners in the Legislative District 16 Assembly primary. This is a district that, again, Democrats are heavily favored in going into November, particularly in the Assembly race.
Yep. Zwicker himself is no slouch. He was the first Democrat to win the district back in 2015. When he beat Jack Chiarelli's running mates in the Assembly very narrowly, and then won by a much more decent margin in 2017 and 2019.
Mm-hmm. And we should note it's very rare in New Jersey politics to have a split Assembly result. So if you get a split Assembly delegation, that's actually quite fascinating from a political standpoint. It's happened a few times. Chitterelli is a notable example of that happening. He survived, but you ultimately had Zwicker locking up that other seat in that race.
Yeah. Just get into like the nitty gritty. Part of the reason is that this district was gerrymandered in the beginning of legislation, like 2011, to include Princeton inside of it, which is like a deep blue hub of Democrats, right? So that probably made the district more blue than what a fair district here would be. But even a fair district at this point in this area would be pretty darn blue.
And we have a new update to report out of the gubernatorial race. 2 updates. As we mentioned earlier, the first returns from the Hudson County Republican primary are coming in. And again, Hudson County is one of the Democratic bastions in the state, one of the strongholds. But as with anything, there are still a few Republicans there. Currently about 400 plus votes cast. And Chitterelli is leading by 12 points, 46-34 over Hirsch Singh. Ultimately, though, Hudson County does not really matter in the Republican primary, especially one being decided by this much. And finally, in Burlington County, again, one of the counties that one could say in the past has been more favorable to Hirsch Singh, but right now breaking reliably for Chitterelli, 49 to 26.5. Ultimately, Chitterelli has ticked down just a little bit, down to 51.6%, with Hirsch Singh up slightly to 26.8% with 7% of the vote in. Most of these counties are reporting at 1% or less than 1% of the vote, except Gloucester, which is reporting 14% of the vote. But altogether, we've still got a lot of votes left to count in this primary. And while Chitterelli has seen his lead decrease, he still maintains a strong lead, and he's still expected to win handily by our estimations.
Yeah, although, man, if Sting winning would be hilarious, but it's not going to happen. You need to make
big drop here, big drop. Bad news for Hirsch Singh. In fact, Atlantic County and Cape May County, both of which have been Hirsch Singh strongholds in his past races, both for Congress and for the Senate, have broken heavily for Jack Chitterelli. Atlantic County right now, Chitterelli is currently winning by 20 points, 52 to 32. Again, very early in Atlantic County, only about 200 votes cast, but worth seeing if that lead holds up. And in Cape May County, Jack Chitterelli is leading with 71.4% of the vote, currently his best performance statewide. And that is 2% of the total votes cast in Cape May. And that has pushed Chitterelli up to about 54% of the vote, really reestablished his lead where it was at the beginning of the night, right as we approach about 10% in. So if those numbers hold, that's very good for Chitterelli. I mean, that's bad news for Hirsch Singh because he had the line in both Atlantic and Cape May in his Senate primary last year.
Yep. Decision Desk also has results in for Ocean and Monmouth counties, the two big banks of Republican vote in New Jersey, and they're both going for Chitterelli. Chitterelli is leading in Ocean 56% to Hirsch Singh's 26%, and he is leading in Monmouth with 51% to Hirsch Singh's 21%. Phil Rizzo actually coming almost third, actually very close third in Monmouth with 20.5%.
Yeah, another notable race here is the 2nd district in the Senate. Like we mentioned earlier with those Wildstein results, it appears to be backed up. These are likely the vote by mail votes being counted in Atlantic County so far, but Vince Palestina, who has the line, is currently beating Grossman by 30 points, 65 to 35. Still quite a few more votes to count there, but again, that's an early lead for Palestina, and he is the favorite going into the night, so we're going to have to wait and see how that race ends up.
A potential caveat is that given that these are almost certainly to vote by mail ballots, at least in Atlantic County, if say Seth Grossman voters or Hirsch Singh voters were more Trumpy, they might be less inclined to vote by mail and more to vote in person. So we might see these races shift a bit more towards them later on as we get more in-person ballots in.
Yep.
But even then, they're leading by 30% right now.
That would certainly explain these massive leads, almost surprisingly large leads in Atlantic and Cape May for Chitterelli. But again, you can see here we have those brand new updates in the 2nd district. No other legislative updates yet, just those in the 2nd district with the VBMs. And we'll be getting you fresh gubernatorial results momentarily. Let me see here. So we'll be getting these gubernatorial results updates. We actually have some new results, 11% reporting now, and we have results from Monmouth County, which means we should also be getting results from the Damaso, Scharfenberg, Flynn assembly race shortly. But Chitterelli is leading in Monmouth by 30 points, and that brings his overall lead to 52.6% to 25%. So, Ethan, can you check and see if there are any results in from that assembly race yet?
Doesn't seem like it. I guess it's not from that part of Monmouth. Monmouth is pretty big. I believe they have 1, 2, 3, 4, like 4 different assembly districts inside of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe 5. Yeah, I think it's 4. But yeah, so I guess it's from a different part of Monmouth.
And again, Brian Levin essentially getting almost 6% of the vote, given the fact that he really didn't compete with the other candidates on the fundraising scale. Is still impressive at this point. I have to give it to him.
Yeah, I I thought he was just some rando freeholder, county commissioner from Somerset County. Like, he might get something in Somerset and probably nothing anywhere else. But no, he's getting a respectable amount right now.
Oh, and we just got results in from Ocean County, the most Republican and most populous of the Republican counties, and Chitterelli is leading here by 30 points. Presumably, though, if these are VBMs, we might have a slight increase in the Sing vote later on, given the tendency of those voters to likely prefer in-person voting. But that Ocean percentage there is still less than 1% of the county's total population.
Decision desk is in. Yep. Decision desk is out in with Mercer County, where Jack Chitterelli is leading with 48%. As in second place here is actually Phil Rizzo with 35%. Well, 34.49% of the vote here. Hirsch Singh in third place with 17% of the vote. I wonder if that's a typo.
It might be an error because all of the other counties have essentially followed the same pattern. Although I will say in Hudson County, even though there's pretty much just a small amount of Republicans voting there, Brian Levin has 10% of the vote and is ahead of Phil Rizzo there, which is quite interesting. That's his best county at the moment, which is ironic considering he's from Somerset. But these numbers here, I'm going to pull them down because they have to be updated. We're now at 16% reporting, but we'll keep going because we have more legislative results that will be coming in, particularly as we await more results out of North Jersey, where a lot of those legislative primaries are. But we'll keep updating you. In terms of reporting by county, in Ocean, less than 1% is in. Same in Mercer. And Atlantic, in Monmouth, 8% is in. Camden, 13%. Gloucester, 14%. Hunterdon, 17%. Cape May, 2%. And Warren, Hudson, and Atlantic, 1%.
Yeah.
We're still waiting on Bergen, Cumberland, Essex, Mercer, Middlesex, Morris, Passaic, Salem, Somerset, Sussex, and Union counties.
It's actually really funny that Hudson seems to be the only county where Phil Rizzo is in fourth place, considering that is not only is Levine, as you mentioned, from Somerset, Phil Rizzo is from Hudson County. Yes, his name recognition isn't getting him very much there. He's from Hoboken. No. Well, there's not too many Republicans there anyway, I suppose.
Yep. And I'm still waiting to see if we're getting any results out of that. Oh, we are. We are getting results out of the 13th District Republican primary for the Assembly, according to the New York Times. The line appears to be holding up. Gerard Scharfenberger, the other incumbent, is in the lead with 37%. Vicky Flynn with 35%. I don't have the exact percentage for DeMasso, although we can pretty much just calculate that right off the bat here. But again, DeMasso is running off of the line there and currently is at 28%. So Scharfenberger, 37%, Flynn, 35%, and the other incumbent running off the line in Monmouth is at 28%. So not horrible right off the bat, but that is not a good sign for DeMasso's chances at another term in the Assembly.
Not a good sign, but also quite a bit closer than I thought it'd be, honestly.
Yeah, it is. That is pretty close, and we're going to have to see if the DeCroce race is also going to be similarly competitive. But I'll get those new results up there for you. All righty.
Yeah, DeMasso hadn't spent that much money, mainly because she didn't have that much money. So, yeah, that's interesting. How long has Serena DeMasso been in the company? Let's see. Yeah, Serena DeMasso has been in the Assembly only since 2018. She's not been there very long.
Yep.
So it's interesting that she's still getting that much of the vote off the line. I suppose this is the early vote, probably, but still.
Yeah, it is likely the early vote. That's what we're seeing throughout the state, but I still think it's worth watching.
Yeah. Just from my personal experience voting, when you're on one of the voting machines, it's very easy to just drag your hand down the machine and just click, 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 click down the line. Fine. So it might. We'll see if in-person votes are more favorable to Vicky Flynn than DeMasso, but who knows? Yeah,
And again, this whole problem arose for her as a result of a deteriorating relationship with Sheriff Sean Golden in Monmouth County, who effectively runs the organization. And unlike DeCroce, who still has Essex and Passaic to give her the line, this is only a Monmouth County only district. So there's really nowhere else to get the endorsement from. So she is literally, in all senses of the term, running off of the line.
Yeah. To be clear, the reason DeMasso got kicked off is like she did the horrible crime of of endorsing a few candidates in her hometown where she was the mayor of instead of what the party endorsed. Oh no, and then he got this thing and kicked her off. In my opinion, that's a horribly petty thing to kick someone off for, but I suppose that's machine politics for you.
And again, if all of these results end up sticking with the line, that won't be a big surprise, given it's a Garden State tradition to effectively stick with. All right, sorry to interrupt. I don't know if this is a reporting error, but Decision Desk has 49 votes in from Union County and shows Phil Rizzo in the lead, followed by Hirsch Singh and then Chitterelli, all leading by one vote. I doubt, I'm not sure if that's filler data or if that's real or what it is, but we're going to have to wait and see.
It's 49 votes, so I don't expect that to be anywhere near representative what we end up there.
Yes.
Would be hilarious, but I don't see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
Phil Rizzo still in second place in Mercer according to Decision Desk. So, oh wait, the New York Times has it too, and the New York Times confirms Phil Rizzo in second place in Mercer County with 34.5% of the votes. Third place with 16.7%. So,
and it's notable again, funny if you're looking at funny things like that. That Brian Levin is in third place in Hudson County, meaning Phil Rizzo is in last, and Levin is not really even coming close anywhere else in the state tonight. Quick update: currently, Palestina is now leading Grossman 69-31, so that's a 4% increase. So that's essentially a 2-3 margin, which lines up with the results that we saw earlier from the early vote, VBM, that was reported in. And David Wildstein just reported, in fact, again, saying this won't be an interesting hour, but if it plays into it, kind of like what I just said, Rizzo is a pastor and his church is in Hudson County, but he's in fourth place in Hudson County, which is interesting to look at that. And it'll be even funnier or ironic if Levin ends up having Somerset as one of his weaker counties, or weaker than Hudson, given the fact that he's from Somerset County. Let's see what other news we have here. We're trying to keep you guys informed. We're still waiting on more results. Here we go. We have the new primary results. I think this is correct. In the vote by mail, these are the first results we're getting in the 13th district. Like I mentioned earlier, that 34-32-28 lead, or 37-34-28. So DeMasso in third. And finally, results from the 20th Senate district. Just like Gordon Johnson was leading Valerie Huddle, Senator Cryan is currently leading Jamel Hawley by a 2-1 margin with 2,000 votes counted. So that's another good one. Ethan, do you have any opinions on this question? I'm curious to see what you think.
Let's see. What would good turnout be for Republicans statewide for a primary? I'm in the camp that primary turnout does not tell you much about the general election, because it's the 5 months apart, completely different environments. Maybe if a primary is not competitive, you wouldn't expect there to be much turnout. And like in New Jersey, we don't tend to have competitive primaries in general because of the line. So I don't know. I don't know what you would mean by good turnout. Historically, turnout. I can check what historically what turnout is in New Jersey, but.
And I'm just noting again, if you had theoretically combined all of the people who didn't vote for Chitterelli, he would only be leading 50.7 to 49.3 right now, which would make this an incredibly close primary. So again, I think Hirsch Singh and Phil Rizzo kind of both shot themselves in the foot by running such similar campaigns with similar messaging, essentially against each other off of the line.
Yeah, I'm
And
thinking
really, this now is just turning into a waiting game. We're just going to wait for results and updates.
I'm seeing in the comments that like some people think that primary turnout can tell you something about enthusiasm within the base, and yeah, it does. However, you have to know like not that many people vote in the primary compared to like the entirety of the party overall, and whoever gets the most turnouts in the primary does not necessarily reflect who will get the most votes in the general election. So, for instance, turnout tends to be higher among activists in most primaries in all states, and therefore that gets you more ideological candidates. And some people think that gets you more turnout in the general election. However, those people also tend to do poorly among like swing voters and stuff. And I don't buy there being like a something direct you can say about general election performance when you just look at turnout in the primary. Some people would think differently, and that's fine. I personally don't think so.
So at the moment here, if we're looking at the closest counties in this gubernatorial primary, given the fact that there aren't really any truly close counties at the moment, Mercer is certainly one of the ones that's more competitive. Chitterelli is only at 47.6% here, and Rizzo is only down by about 13 points. And that's a much smaller margin than you see in Hunterdon. Warren County is one of the counties where Hirsch Singh is only 14 points down. Not too terrible for him at the moment. Hudson is in a similar boat for Hirsch Singh. Ocean County, pretty much overwhelmingly for Chitterelli. Same with Monmouth County and Burlington County and Camden County. Atlantic County and Cape May County are the heaviest for Chitterelli at the moment, despite that really being the niche spot for Hirsch Singh in the past. But we're really going to have to wait for the election day votes to be counted there, not only for that race, but also for the 2nd District Senate primary, where Policena is up 2-1, essentially by a 2/3 margin with the VBMs counted. So we have to wait for those election day votes to come in. We do have a slight difference in the 16th district. Pappas has fallen below 60% and is now leading Jeffrey Grant by a 58-42 margin. We still expect him to win, but that is one of the more competitive primaries that is currently up. And we've been getting results from our other contests on Twitter, even though besides the DeMasso, Flynn, Scharfenberger one, we really don't have any results on New York Times yet. Do you have any comments on these races? Anything you expect to change? Someone in the comments also correctly noted that Chitterelli has just now fallen below 50% statewide, and it appears that those 49 votes in Union County were in fact correct. Still early, and again, it's a Democratic county, but Phil Rizzo is leading Singh by 1, and Singh's leading Chitterelli by 1. So it's really back to back to back with just barely any votes in there.
These can't be all the vote by mail ballots in Union. Union actually has a decent Union is mostly Democratic, obviously, but it does have a few Republican pockets in it. So I feel, there has to be more vote by mail ballots there. I wonder where those are from. Those 49 votes.
Yeah, it is curious. I mean, obviously, it's not the majority. It's not even a fraction of the votes that will end up being cast. But
yeah, this is the home of Tom Kean and John Bramnick and Republican leadership and the moderate Republicans. I'd be frankly shocked if like someone like Hirsch Singh won this county.
Yeah. And a little update out of 13, Scharfenberger has fallen to 36% of the votes. That's about a 1% drop. Vicki Flynn has also risen now to 35.6. So the top two contenders are within 1% of each other. And DeMasso, unfortunately for her, has really remained at 28%. Not much change there, 28.1%. So just a very tiny change. Just a few more ballots have come in there.
Sir, it'd be a respectable result, but unfortunately, respectable does not win you any any seats in the assembly.
Yeah. Close doesn't count in elections, unfortunately. But certainly, if she does better than DeCroce in her race, that would actually be quite interesting, considering that DeCroce at least still has the line in about 30% of the district, electorally speaking.
Speaking of which, we have Decision Desk now reports our first results from Morris County. Jack Chitterelli in the lead with 59%. Phil Rizzo in second place here at 28.5%. Hirsch Singh in third place with a measly 10% of the votes. And Brian Levin in fourth place with 3%. So another county where Phil Rizzo is in second place.
And again, most of the Republican voters you're going to find in Somerset and Morris, these are certainly not counties where Hirsch Singh is very potable to the same extent. I mean, Hirsch Singh would be definitely expecting him to do better in counties like Atlantic, Cape May, Ocean, rather than a county like Morris or Somerset.
Also, I think I missed this in Hunterdon. Phil Rizzo is. I'm not sure if I missed this before, but Phil Rizzo is in second place in Hunterdon as well. So Jack Chitterelli at 49%, Phil Rizzo at 25%, Hirsch Singh at 23%.
And just from a grassroots perspective, I've seen a lot more enthusiasm in this part of New Jersey for Phil Rizzo than I have for Hirsch Singh at this point. And I honestly think, if you want my opinion, that quite a few people have just begun to see through Hirsch Singh. Whereas Phil Rizzo has seemed like a more credible alternative for voters who still wanted to back someone who was more conservative, or in this case, from part of the more religious right in the state, which is not the biggest faction in a state like New Jersey.
Imagine the alternative reality where Hirsch Singh doesn't run and Phil Rizzo would actually have a decent shot, it looks like, at beating Jack Chitterelli in the primary off the line. Huh.
Certainly, yes.
The combined vote of Hirsch Singh and Phil Rizzo right now would be 47% to Jack Chitterelli's current 49%.
Yeah, and again, we can't assume all the vote would have gone that way, but overall, this would not bode very well for Chitterelli in this particular circumstance. If it were a race between him and one other credible opponent.
Of course, since they're split to vote evenly, Jack Chitterelli still has a healthy 25-point lead on his second place opponent, so he should still be fine. But it might get. I predicted a 30-point win. I don't think we're getting that. It's early. But, yeah.
I am also a bit surprised. I certainly predicted a larger win than we're currently seeing, and we still have a lot of votes to count with about 30% in. But again, if you think about it, if more of the election day Republican vote, at least in some parts of the state, is expected to have gone to Hirsch Singh and Phil Rizzo, that effectively means Chitterelli will probably still be fine, but we could just see Chitterelli, at least in the parts of the district or the state that are already reporting, decline a little bit overall. Although, again, we're still waiting on counties like Somerset. Obviously, he did very well in Somerset and Hunterdon, even in the primary against Kim Guadagno. But big news now with over 30% in. Phil Rizzo has officially moved into second place, overtaking Hirsch Singh by about a point now, about 1,000 votes. He's now in second place. And unfortunately for Chitterelli, and I expect him to keep sinking a little bit, but Chitterelli has sunk again down by another point and is now at 48.3% of the primary vote.
Oh, that would be such a meme.
Which, again, if he keeps sinking to like 46, 47, that might work in a primary like this where the conservative vote is split, or I should say the Trump conservative vote is split. But that just shows you if this had been a 1v1 race, he could have lost without the line, which would have been rather unprecedented.
Man, that world where it's not Chitterelli who wins, it's not Hirsch Singh, it's this random pastor from Hudson County, Phil Rizzo, your new candidate for governor. That'd be pretty funny considering he has got like no media attention whatsoever.
Well, there's that, and we might have expected some of the election day vote to go to Hirsch Singh, but now it appears a lot of that election day vote might actually be going to Phil Rizzo. I mean, you can kind of see if you look at the counties reporting where Chitterelli is, decently below, at least significantly below 50%. those are probably the same counties where you would have seen Rizzo victories. And Monmouth is one of them, as Evan Clipson pointed out in the comments. Phil Rizzo's at 31% there, which is a very good performance for him. Same with Mercer County on the border there to the west, where he's at 32% of the vote. And again, the only county lead for Rizzo right now is Union. But again, very, very early in Union. And given his meager performance in Hudson, unless that changes, I don't really expect anything impressive for him out of Union once the night is over.
Yeah. Just to go into some, classic TV style punditry, anecdotally, only as of 2 weeks ago and last weekend even now, I've seen a lot more Phil Rizzo signs and Hirsch Singh signs and Jack Ciattarelli signs. I assume this is because Jack, reasonably so, thought he had it locked up and therefore didn't need to put up lawn signs everywhere because I have the line. Why would I need to worry about the primary? But who knows? Maybe lawn signs do actually work because I don't think Phil Rizzo really advertised much. Who knows?
And ironically, I've seen a ton of Phil Rizzo lawn signs in Somerset County. Rizzo, Singh. You know who I haven't seen with lawn signs? Ciattarelli. I have not seen Ciattarelli. And again, ultimately, I mean, it's just anecdotal evidence. It's a little fun. But ultimately, Ciattarelli has dominated the TV media market, and that's far more important than the lawn sign advantage in some portions that Singh might have had or Rizzo might have had.
Who knows? Maybe in the age of social media, the idea that Jack Ciattarelli is some sort of Republican.
Well, he's also just raised a whole lot more than Singh and Rizzo and spent his money well, if you think about it, because the modern campaign does rely on social media and TV advertising, not as much traditional signs.
Yeah. There's been I've heard anecdotally that there's been a decent effort among like the more Trumpian QAnon wings of the Republican Party to brand Jack Ciattarelli as a rhino and to get a true Trumper into office, because Jack Ciattarelli, notably in 2016, refused to endorse Donald Trump. He did so. He voted for him in 2020, but yeah.
Real quick, I'm going to explain the line. So the line in every county except Salem, at least for the Republicans, you have what is effectively the party organization committee, and that committee endorses a slate of candidates for each office, and they appear in a select column on that party's primary ballot. So, for example, you may have all of the candidates endorsed by, let's say, the Monmouth County Republicans appearing in column 1, and in the second column, you have someone like Serena DeMasso, the incumbent, running off of the line. And sometimes you'll have candidates bring other candidates along with them on the line in their column to make their column look more credible, or make their own organization to endorse them. Notably in Middlesex, there's the official Democratic organization, and then there's the County Democrats of Middlesex, which is a bit confusing to people. But effectively, the line is what most people vote for, and that's why we don't have competitive primaries in the state very often, because ultimately the line almost always wins out, because people will vote for the line because they have candidates for every office, they're in the same column, and they look more credible.
And we have a new batch of results in from Sussex County. So Jack Ciattarelli here leading with 38% to Phil Rizzo 33%. So that's pretty close. And Hirsch Singh's in third place with 26% of the vote, and Brian Levine's down there with 3%. So yeah, we might get our first Phil Rizzo County here, maybe.
And some updates to the legislative races for those that are interested. If you want to look at or bring your eyes down to the 13th District Republican primary, it's roughly the same. DeMasso has increased slightly at 28.6% of the vote. But the real matchup here is just out of curiosity to see who will finish first. Scharfenberger, an incumbent who is relatively newer than DeMasso, or Flynn. Scharfenberger is currently ahead of Flynn by 0.4%, with DeMasso, the other incumbent, approaching 29% of the vote. But if this doesn't get more flexible, DeMasso might just be out of luck, essentially, even if she ends up with a rather respectable, closer performance.
Yeah, Scharfenberger himself is a relatively new assemblyman as well. He only came into office in 2020 after a long time assemblywoman Amy Hamlin retired. So
Yeah.
makes sense that he might not have much name recognition yet.
And we have new updates out of 13 again. So Damaso's down by 1,000 votes here. So again, it could tighten up, but it appears to be a bit of a frozen watch, if you want to think of it like that, not really changing or fluctuating at all.
Let's see.
And Palestina still leading Grossman 69-31, and Pappas leading Grant 60-40. And ultimately in Atlantic County at the moment, Chitterelli still has his lead in Atlantic County and in Cape May County, but as they start to count some of those election day votes, we're seeing Singh and Rizzo both increase. Ultimately, when you look at both of those facts, it kind of fits in with what Ethan and I were talking about earlier. And it seems that the election day vote as it comes in is actually helping Singh and Rizzo a bit, and that will detract from the overall margin for Chitterelli statewide. But again, guys, for our new viewers coming over from the Virginia stream, thank you so much for watching, and we hope to have you here for the next hour, however long it takes. We'll be here counting the ballots. We're at about 40% reporting in the gubernatorial race, and we'll be getting live updates and results for you on all of the fascinating races that we're covering tonight.
Also, I think we missed this from 15 minutes ago. David Wildstein, the lead editor of the New Jersey Globe, he has called the state senate race in the 37th district for Gordon Johnson. Gordon Johnson was running against fellow Assemblywoman Valerie Veneeri Huddle to replace longtime Senator Loretta Weinberg, and he's saying that Gordon Johnson is set to win by a significant margin. So another win for the line and the establishment here.
Yep, and that would also reflect the district overall. It's another district with a strong minority population, and I wouldn't be surprised if Johnson really locked up those voter groups, the Hispanic and African American Democratic groups, to have a commanding victory in that primary.
Yep. To be clear, Gordon Johnson is an African American, and while Valerie Huddle is a white. So
it is also a safe Democratic seat. So despite his slightly older age compared to Huddle, Johnson will be going to the Senate almost certainly. The district is safe Democratic. And yes, to answer Clemson's question, Pappas is on the line and he is expected to win. We're going to wait a little bit longer, but you'll likely have a projection from us soon in that race. It's going to stay likely Democratic, rated as a flip for Andrew Zwicker, who continues to dominate the fundraising campaign in that race. It's going to be a difficult race for any Republican to win, especially a congressman that served one term 20 years ago, who's trying to make up for the Bateman legacy. Even Kit Bateman would have trouble holding this district if he were running, given how Democratic it's become, even since the last time he ran for re-election in 2017 and won by just a single point in a race that Democrats really didn't put much effort into, if we look at it in hindsight. Well, Andrew Zwicker is certainly not doing that. Democrats learned their lesson from that district last time, and Zwicker is going to put up a fight there.
Yeah. Wonder if they'll finally try this year in LD 21, which Tom Kaine's district, which is basically as Democratic as LD 16 was 4 years ago.
Well, that's a good matchup because someone like Pappas is not like John Bramnick. Bramnick's the leader of the state assembly for the Republicans. He's been in the seat. He's an incumbent. He hasn't been out of office for 20 years. And Joseph Signorello, the mayor of Roselle Park, is a good candidate too. So that's going to be a tough matchup, in my opinion. And that's why we have it rated as a toss-up. It's one of three races that are rated as toss-ups, along with LD2 and LD8 for the Senate. So again, that just shows you how a strong down-ballot Republican like Bramnick can keep a seat that's basically as Democratic as the seat that Zwicker's running for in the 16th as a toss-up instead of a likely Democratic seat.
Yeah, I think we talked about it in our pre-coverage, but if you might notice, the other two top seats we have rated as toss-ups, LD2 and LD8, those are both significantly Biden districts. LD2, in fact, was double digits for both Biden, Clinton, and Phil Murphy. But we have it as a toss-up because, like some of the Central Jersey districts, except this was in Atlantic County, LD2 is much more Republican down ballot. As we mentioned, current retiring incumbent Chris Brown beat an incumbent Democratic state senator 4 years ago, and 2 years ago, both assemblymen almost lost re-election. So this is why, despite it being a Biden plus 11 seat or something, we think it's a toss-up.
Yep. And just to get back to the gubernatorial race real quick, we actually have quite a lot of votes that have been counted in this race. We're at 42% reporting, and we're only about an hour and 15 minutes into the race, and we're already about halfway done with the count. Jack Ciattarelli overall has sunk further in the total vote count down to 47.7% of the vote. Again, this would certainly be bad for him if this were a 1v1 primary, but since the Singh and Rizzo combined conservative Trump vote, if you want to call it that, is split rather heavily, Phil Rizzo is narrowly in the lead ahead of Hersh Singh, 25.6 to Singh's 23.5%. To answer one question in the comments, we're not really sure what's going on with Union County at the moment, and it's 49 votes, but we'll be waiting. If that holds, then someone broke something, to put it politely. But in terms of counties reporting, we have quite a few counties that are close to fully reporting. Monmouth County is at 81% reporting currently. Ciattarelli has a fairly sizable lead there, but Phil Rizzo is also doing very well at 31.9% of the vote. Ocean County, 45% in, Camden, 67%, Gloucester, 78%, and Hunterdon, 66% reporting. Notably, we're still waiting on quite a few important counties in North Jersey, ones where, especially in Somerset, for example, Ciattarelli needs to really run up the score, but also Essex, Cumberland, and Bergen. Well, Cumberland's in the south, sorry. Bergen is really one you would look out for up north. Somerset as well. Sussex is a smaller county, but it's also reliably Republican, so we'd include that on the list. But ultimately, every vote's going to count, so we're just going to keep waiting for more results to come in. And we have another projection now. At this point, we can project that the line will be held up in the 16th District Senate Republican primary, with Mike Pappas, the former congressman, defeating Jeffrey Grant 60-40 there. His lead dipped to 58-42 for a bit, but it has gone back up again. Overall, I think that it's pretty reliable if we were to pick Pappas in this race. I don't see any signs at the moment that this race is going to sink down and damage Pappas's chances of making it to the general election. So ultimately, that will put Mike Pappas in a matchup against Andrew Zwicker in a race that we consider to be likely Democratic. And we're at 45% reporting. Phil Rizzo still going up, 25.6% now. And we're still waiting for Ocean to come in. But if Ciattarelli maintains a very large lead in Ocean, which at the moment I would not exactly say he's doing, he has a large lead over Singh, but about 45% of the vote is in Ocean, and that's still a lot out. So we're going to keep waiting.
Also, we've just gotten more votes from Union, so sorry, Phil Rizzo, you are no longer leading. According to Decision Desk, Jack has taken the lead here with 41% of the vote. Phil Rizzo has sunk down to second with 35%.
Although Phil Rizzo sank down a little bit there, but he's still at 34.9%, which is a fairly good performance. I mean, that's probably the closest county on here, and he has risen. He rose up quite significantly in Hudson County, up to 13.7%, taking the lead over Brian Levin there for third place. Still far behind Singh, and still a bit ironic considering his church is in Hudson County. But we're going to keep waiting there to see if he manages to increase his margin in Hudson, which is currently about 17% in. And another big county that has a lot of votes out is Burlington. It's less than 1% reporting. So we're still waiting on a lot of votes there. Cape May and Atlantic, 33 and 24% in respectively. Large leads for Chitterelli. Although, again, we've seen the overall combined opposition to Chitterelli increase since the VBMs are done being counted and we're on to Election Day votes. Although that hasn't seemed to have had an effect yet, unless New York Times just hasn't updated on the 2nd District State Senate primary, where Policena is still credibly ahead of Grossman by a significant margin. And David Wildstein has projected that Assemblywoman Serena DeMasso has lost the primary in the 13th district to Vicki Flynn for that 2nd district spot. So ultimately, looking at that race, it is a respectable performance. It is competitive, but it's really stayed locked. There have only been minor changes, and ultimately, when you've got a 35-28 race like that, it's a respectable performance off the line, but DeMasso really can't make that up. And that makes her the first incumbent to lose tonight in the legislature.
All right. Because we have some empty time right now, and this just happened, I'd like to step back a bit from our New Jersey coverage, talk about something that happened in Virginia, where notable socialist House of Delegates member incumbent Lee Carter has just lost his primary there. In addition to doing absolutely horribly in his long, very, very long shot bid for governor there. So he has lost to his challenger by 6 points, and it has nothing to do with New Jersey. I just found it pretty funny, and most people in the chat probably know who that is.
And that is interesting. Just to return to the governor's race, we could very well have a projection here shortly since we're approaching half in. We're just waiting a little bit longer. We don't expect Chitterelli to lose the race, but it is possible that Singh could win in Cape May and Atlantic if the Election Day votes, essentially the other half of the remaining votes that are out, or the 2/3 out in Atlantic and Cape May respectively, break for him. That could also help Grossman, although, again, we haven't really seen any new results pouring in yet from those races. But we do concur with Wildstein's projection that DeMasso has lost. And if DeCroce loses as well, they will be 2 early victims from assembly races tonight, although we have not seen results yet out of that assembly seat.
Wildstein has now also made another projection in LD20. Senator Joe Cryan will easily win the Democratic primary against Jamel Hawley, and the anti-vaxxer movement takes another step back.
And that effectively marks the end of the Huddle campaign and the Hawley campaign. Both of those individuals sought to assert the line in Democratic Senate districts, and both have apparently failed by large margins. So if anything, as usual, the New Jersey line holds up. Not much more reliable. Not really anything more reliable or more expected in the Garden State than the party line at this point. I think this might make an interesting discussion here because, I mean, it's genuinely a good argument if you think about it. I mean, Chitterelli has kept going down. Now he's at 47.6% with half in. And if you really think about it, if you had one person running to his right, someone like Phil Rizzo could have actually won.
You know, I think that there's a very good chance that Hirsch Singh might have cost Phil Rizzo the nomination. You know, or like if Phil Rizzo dropped out, because of how many controversies around Hirsch Singh, I don't think Hirsch Singh really would have had a chance in the one-on-one. But Phil Rizzo seems to be, by the fact he's in second place right now, seems to be a more credible candidate, one who doesn't have a billion scandals in his past, who isn't living in his parents' house, and isn't running off his dad's fun money.
Yeah, ultimately, Chitterelli is the most credible candidate here on paper and would probably do the best against Phil Murphy. But both Hirsch Singh and Phil Rizzo, whatever you think of either individual, have both collectively shot themselves in the foot.
Classic case of splitting the vote. This is why
Yeah,
we have
although it is still close here, and if Singh does have a surge in Atlantic and Cape May, as Wildstein said could be possible, that would probably be enough to put him back into second place.
consolation prize, I suppose, for spending how much money of his dad's money? I don't know.
A lot, because his net worth is only $100,000, but he's spent all like $500,000, $600,000, something like that. A lot of money for a campaign that frankly isn't very credible. And again, we really haven't had any raw results shown on New York Times, so I don't really know how those two primaries we were watching in 20 and 37 actually ended up. We really just have the results from Wildstein there, but hopefully we'll be able to look at some analysis in the coming days. Just some quick updates on Governor. Monmouth County now 92% in, Hunterdon 90% in, and many other counties that reported earlier in the night are approaching either 60% in or 80% in at this point. Overall, we've passed 50%, so the ballots in this primary are being counted relatively quickly, at least in the counties that are reporting. We're still waiting in Cape May and Atlantic. The ballots have been a bit slow there to be counted from Election Day. And of course, we're still waiting on a couple counties to report what will essentially make up the remaining 48% of the Republican primary turnout tonight.
I think we have our first votes in from LD26, the primary there. According to New York Times, Jay Weber has 45% of the votes. Christian Barranco, the union official, has 32%. And doing some quick math, that would probably leave Betty DeCroce with 23% of the votes. So,
well, this is horrible for DeCroce, but ultimately, if you look at the breakdown of the counties in this district, 75% of the Republican vote is in Morris. And even though DeCroce lives in Morris and has served in the assembly since 2012 and ran a very good ground campaign, it appears that once again the line is victorious. It's almost impossible to surmount it at this point. The reason why, I mean, I would be pretty confident that DeCroce would be winning in Essex and Passaic where she has the line. I mean, the reason why she's probably at 28% and losing is because she's in third place in Morris.
Yeah, we don't have any results in from Essex and Passaic, and we'd expect her to be winning there first place probably because she's the only one on the line in those two places. I believe Weber has come off the line to join Barranco.
Yes.
But even then,
and you don't need Essex or Passaic. That's the thing. She lost the line in the one part of the district where she frankly needed to stay on the line, because a lot of voters that really don't have a vested interest in this stuff are just going to vote for the line, even if they've heard of DeCroce as their assemblywoman.
I wouldn't count DeCroce completely out just yet because she is only down, I think, only 9%. Well, I say 9%. It's a two.
And again, she really only has to make that second place spot. So if she can surmount Barranco somehow, that's all that matters.
Yeah, so I wouldn't count her completely out yet, but it's still very uphill.
Yeah, it's not a good place to start because it's honestly a bigger deficit from the second place spot than DeMasso had in that assembly race before she ended up losing by a couple points, about the same, about 9%.
New York Times still haven't updated with the Sussex County stuff yet for some reason.
New York Times hasn't updated a lot of these races. I'm really relying on Wildstein here for a lot of these results.
Yep. Decision desk. Oh, and the New Jersey Globe has now projected Jack Chitterelli to win the Republican nomination for governor of New Jersey. He will face Governor Phil Murphy in the general election in this November.
Yep, and we currently rate the race as likely Democratic, although we'll be having some rating reevaluations going forward. The real question now, from a political standpoint, again, we expected Chitterelli to win. The question is, how close will the race end up being in the end? Can Rizzo crack 30%? If they both stay below 30%, will Singh be able to take over second place from Rizzo? How low will Chitterelli go? Will he go back up? Will there be a surge in Atlantic or Cape May? Is there any way Hirsch Singh can win a county? These are all questions we turn to now just out of sheer being political nerds really looking at this stuff.
Yeah, the last contested primary that we're really looking at is LD26. We're just going to see if Betty Lou DeCroce had a chance of keeping her assembly seat.
Yeah, and again, like Virginia, the night's over pretty early, so we'll still be talking about this on Twitter, but as soon as we really get more information in from some of these legislative races, we'll probably be able to wrap up the night because the gubernatorial results are being counted pretty quickly, and most of these races have had a definitive call. Although at this point, we've seen a slightly more pronounced effect of the so-called Singh surge a little bit in the Atlantic, Cape May County area. Because in the Atlantic-based 2nd District, we've seen Grossman rise by just 1%. And again, there are still a lot of votes out, but generally, if the Election Day vote is going to be more favorable to the perceived more conservative candidates, I think it's very possible that Grossman could get up to like 40% or so, but I don't think at this rate he's going to be able to make up that big of a deficit against Palestina, which would, again, uphold the line. No news also about Pat Deignan in the 18th district running against Mohin Patel, again, someone who was involved in the anti-Muslim racism scandal there in Edison in 2017. We haven't seen any results there yet, although I'm checking on Wildstein's page to see if there's anything. Really, the governor's race is the big projection there. Someone asked about the 21st district in the assembly. My page is actually frozen. Yes, so the two Republican candidates on the line for assembly in the 21st are Nancy Munoz and Michelle Matsakudis. So both of them are on the line. Both of them are winning easily, and both of them are expected to advance to the general election campaign, which we rate as leans Republican. We think Republicans have a better chance at holding both assembly seats than the Senate seat, which is a toss-up. And then Jennifer McCarr, the third candidate on the ballot there, is not expected to advance at this point because 84% of the combined vote is going to the two candidates on the line. So Munoz is fine. Matsakudis may finish above Munoz, which is interesting, but they're both going to be advancing to the general election because if you remember, assembly races in New Jersey, each party has two candidates in the general election. Other than that, we looks like Hunterdon now is about 100% in, Gloucester 94% in, and Monmouth 92% in. So all of those counties pretty well reported. We're hovering around at about 52% total reporting in, with Chitterelli at 47.6% here. And we have also projected him to win that race. So Ethan, do you have any other comments or thoughts while we're waiting on more results out of the 26th?
Well, yeah, I was actually going to ask you, what do you, given that we now know what the matchup is going to be, what thoughts do you have about, the November election? This would, if Phil Murphy wins, this would be the first time that a sitting Democratic governor would have won re-election in like 50 years. Yeah,
it would be the first time since 1977 when Democrat Brendan Barron won a second term. And that's 44 years ago. Interestingly enough, he was an incumbent and he faced multiple Democrats in that primary, competitive, true, credible Democrats. And he won the primary with 30% of the vote and then won the general election. Now, it's quite interesting because Murphy didn't face a single primary opponent. And we really haven't had a governor lose a primary since, what was it? I think it was It was the race before 77 with the Republican governor. I forget his name. I'll look it up to confirm it here. But looking ahead to this race, I think the Eagleton poll ultimately inflates Murphy's margin a little bit. We have to remember New Jersey is a very inelastic state. overall. But if you want my honest opinion, looking at the race, I think a likely Democratic rating fits it. I mean, that can be reevaluated. Ciattarelli's not a bad candidate. It's just a question of has polarization really impacted New Jersey to the extent that this long trend will be broken? I mean, the Democrats held the governor's mansion between 2001 and 2005. It just didn't count because McGreevey resigned and Corzine took over in 2005, so it wasn't technically the same governor. But that was the only time in which the Democrats won 2 consecutive gubernatorial elections. And to answer the question about the primary defeat, that occurred in 1973, which was the election in which Brendan Byrne won. The incumbent governor that year was William Cahill, and I couldn't remember his opponent's name, which is why I looked it up. But he was defeated by Charles Sandman, a representative from, I believe, Burlington County at the time, by 17 points. So we had that defeat. That was the last time an incumbent governor was defeated in a primary. And the last time a sitting senator was defeated in a primary in New Jersey was the 1978 race, where Republican Jeff Bell ran to the right of liberal Republican Clifford Case, who in many cases was more liberal than many Democrats in the Senate at the time, and beat him narrowly, effectively off of the line that year. And finally, to top off the list of primaries that really don't happen very often, we haven't had just a straight up congressional primary for the House in which a sitting member was defeated in a normal election since like the 30s. I don't even remember that. But we have had 2 redistricting primaries, one of which occurred in the 1974 cycle. A Jersey City Democrat named Dominic Daniels held on to that seat, but another Congressman, Fred Gallagher, I believe, lost. He was from Bayonne, and he ultimately did not make it on to the ballot there in that redistricting primary. And finally, if you want to think about the more recent redistricting primary, we had the Rothman-Pascrell matchup, which was won by Pascrell because Pascrell did extremely well in the Passaic portion, despite the Passaic portion making up a smaller portion of the electorate than the Bergen portion, which was enough to give him a 60-40 win. So overall, the machine is king. It's king in the state. The line is king. And as I just mentioned, compared to other states in this country, having that small a number of successful gubernatorial primary challenges, Senate primary challenges, and congressional redistricting matchups is incredibly, incredibly rare. Very rare compared to other states.
Although there have been a few close calls recently, very recently for primary. So Jeff Van Drew, immediately after voting to impeach, not voting to impeach Donald Trump for the first impeachment, he was actually about to get kicked off the line by many of the county organizations in New Jersey Second, which is the main reason, which is part of why he switched parties, because otherwise he'd be running off the line, and despite his personal popularity in much of the district, he probably wouldn't be able to. He'd probably still lose the primary because the line is king. As for governors, we mentioned that Jim McGreevey stepped down after 1 term, and John Corzine got elected. John Corzine at the time was actually planning to primary Jim McGreevey because McGreevey was pretty darn unpopular and was super corrupt in many ways. Fun story, the guy appointed Jared Kushner's dad, then a major donor to Democrats, to head, I believe, the Port Authority of New Jersey, New York. That through a funny incident, through a law of dominoes, led eventually to Chris Christie getting kicked off the transition team of Donald Trump. It's a very long line of dominoes, but it's pretty fun.
We've had other hypothetical primary challenges that didn't pan out that could have been competitive. I mean, one great example was the Florio re-election in 1993, which ultimately failed, albeit by a narrow margin because he lost. 2 parts of that race. First off, in the midterms that year, following his election in 1989, the unpopular Florio tax plan, which made Florio infamous, did 2 things. First off, it almost cost Senator Bill Bradley his seat in 1990. He only won by about 3 points because he effectively, for most of the campaign, had been sitting out of the race. So it was really a shock when the race started to become competitive in the final weeks. And ultimately, when he only won by a small amount. So not only did it really, really endanger Bradley to the point of him having a close race, it also frankly dilapidated the Democrats to such a great extent in the legislative midterm that they completely lost their stakehold in the Senate and the Assembly. And finally, that culminated in Christine Todd Whitman, who's now well known as a moderate Republican, one of the Republicans who spoke at the Democratic National Convention and endorsed Biden, but at that point beat Jim Florio narrowly on a lot of negative energy toward that tax plan. And he was going to face a primary challenge, but much like Murphy, although obviously not in the same boat popularity-wise, his primary challenger didn't make the ballot, even though he got a lot of grassroots attention and a lot of signatures. His ballot petition was ultimately thrown out by the courts in that 93 race.
Yeah, New Jersey's had a Republican trifecta as recently as I think 1999, I think?
Yep, 1999. During the Whitman, at the very end of the Whitman years.
Yep.
It was actually that second Whitman midterm, if you want to call it the 6-year itch, although that's normally applied to presidential administrations, that kind of collapsed that for the Republicans.
And back to some more. We know it's over for the gubernatorial primary, but we've gotten results in from Essex and Somerset now, where Jack Ciattarelli is handily winning both of these. Which is sort of expected. He's winning Somerset by about 26 points over Phil Rizzo. That's where his old district was. He's winning Essex with 67% of the vote to Hirsch Singh's 17%. Again, at this point, we're just seeing if who wins second place, and if maybe one cracks 30% by some miracle.
Yeah, again, and the whole line is pretty much going to hold. So the stream is probably going to wrap up as soon as we get a little bit more in terms of returns out of the second district, but as well out of the assembly race that we're following in the 26th district there. Although, interestingly enough, New York Times finally reported the 20th district result, and Cryan is leading Hawley 62-35. So, again, a very significant lead. Probably a similar margin in the 37th district Senate race between Johnson and Huddle, if not more.
Although, according to the New York Times, in the 26th district, if I'm doing my math correctly here, Weber at 39%, Barranco at 25%. That should leave. I'm not doing my math right here. That's not possible. I need. Give me more. I need to check. I'm going to see if I can find a different source for that.
Wouldn't that put? Well, that doesn't make sense because that would put
DeCroce.
Yeah, 36%, which would put her in second place.
Yeah, that makes no sense. I'm going to see if I can find a different source.
Yeah, because 39, 25, 64. So there's no way. I mean, I don't know why Barranco is shown in second place if he would be behind DeCroce. If so, that would really be the only instance of the line failing tonight. Yeah, and we'll be looking for a different source there. But again, we're getting close to wrapping up the night here. A lot like Virginia, this primary, almost to a greater extent, has been relatively decided early on. And I'll get another source on that 26th district here. Let me see if my source is loading up here. I'm using.
Of course, Decision Desk doesn't have. I don't know why Decision Desk decided to feature State Senate District 18.
Well, that's honestly not that bad. Some of the other assembly races they featured aren't even competitive. So,
yeah, 26 is one of the real competitive ones. Maybe depends on what we find here.
So, Assembly District 26, I'm not seeing any new results yet. Overall, Hirsch thing has sunk a little bit further down to 22.7% in that quote unquote surge that we had been expecting out of Cape May County and Atlantic County. That might be the only thing left that could serve as any form of hope for Hirsch thing, although not in Cape May, because Cape May County is now 93% reporting and Chitterelli is still winning by a commanding margin. So that pretty much throws those hopes out the window for Singh. Atlantic, on the other hand, we're still waiting on 2/3 of the ballots to come in. But again, the margin is pretty much the same. I mean, Cape May proved to be one of the best county results for Chitterelli tonight. In fact, I believe the only county in which he cracked 60%. He's at 61.4% there and just below 60 in Atlantic. So both Rizzo and Singh have performed poorly there. And ultimately, this election day vote matchup doesn't seem to be helping Grossman. In fact, it appears if the Palestina 68-32 lead really holds on, that will effectively be the demise of Seth Grossman and his political ambition in the South.
On the other hand, I found a new source I'm getting from the Associated Press, well, via NJ.com, and Betty Lou DeCroce has a real chance of winning. Currently, the results in District 26 are Jay Weber at 39%, Christian Barranco at 25%, and Betty Lou DeCroce at 24%. She is only down by 10 votes to Barranco right now.
And that's fascinating because that, if it turns out, that would be the only race tonight where the party line, at least in part of the district, failed. And that would be notable because Morris County, it makes up about 75% of the district. So if the line there fails after being brand new, then essentially that will ensure that the quote-unquote Barranco coup against the incumbent in DeCroce was not something that came to fruition in the end.
Yeah, I'm trying to see how much the vote from everywhere is in yet, because I know we now have some of Essex County in, which is one of the places where DeCroce had the line. So that almost certainly contributed to her current position. But yeah.
Any viewers that are just joining us or have been here or have left the Virginia stream, thank you so much for joining us. We've already decided, just as a rundown, we projected Chitterelli has won the gubernatorial nomination, and with 63% in, his margin has begun to tick back up again. He's at about 49% of the vote. So we're really watching that. And at this point, the most exciting race we're watching, since Palestina is effectively going to be projected winner and Deignan is probably going to beat Patel, is the 26th District Assembly race, because Morris County, which makes up 75% of the district's electoral base, introduced its new line this year. They introduced Christian Barranco, a former Democrat, a pro-union Republican, somebody who joined up with Jay Weber, the other incumbent, to commit a coup essentially against Betty DeCroce, who lives in Morris County. And as Ethan just pointed out, that second place spot appears very contentious. And there's a chance that DeCroce could secure that second place spot, beating Barranco, making this the only primary tonight where the line, even the line in one county portion of the district, proved to be incorrect, since the line so far has been upheld everywhere else. This is also really the only district we're seeing where the line has been split by county, in the small Passaic and Essex portions, where we can assume the Republicans are running up big margins with DeCroce. She has the line there and is the only candidate to have the line there.
Although I'm not sure we projected this yet. Have we projected LD 39 yet?
Which district?
The 39th district, where Holly Shapidi's assembly candidates are running a challenge to Bob Roth and Deanne DeFuccio.
I don't think we've projected that race yet. I haven't seen
a
lot of results, although I know Oth and DeFuccio are both leading with 33 and 32% respectively. I'm not sure where Kirpus and Azaridi are at the moment.
Here, I'll send you a link to the AP results. Currently, I think we can safely project this one. Maybe 37% of precincts load, with 37% of precincts reporting. Bob Oss and Dan DiFuccio have 33% and 32% of the vote, respectively, while John Azarides and Jonathan Kirpus have 18% and 17% of the vote, respectively. So they are pretty far behind right now.
We do have another update. I think it's safe to say we can project Vince Palestina the winner over Seth Grossman, and that's certainly the Republican that the Atlantic County organization wanted to win going into November against Vince Mazzeo there. Vince Mazzeo, the assemblyman for the Democrats who's running in what we consider a toss-up seat and still consider that. But David Wildstein reports that with 62% of the vote counted, Grossman is losing by a 2-to-1 margin. So that 69-31 margin, and that's not something that's not good news, essentially, to put it lightly. With almost 70% of the vote in, that's not a good position for Grossman, and it's unlikely there will be enough to really come back from.
In other news, it seems Marty Small, the mayor of Atlantic City, will easily defeat his pro-Trump rival, former Assemblyman Tom Foley, for the primary for mayor of Atlantic City. So, rip to the Atlantic City Democratic machine. Can't beat the line still. In fact, he got absolutely crushed there.
In fact, these AP results, I honestly like the format better than what I had in the New York Times layout, because you can actually see the county results and all of the candidates.
Oh, yeah, so we can see those. Okay, in that case, I'm going to check out the county results for LD26.
Yeah, I'm switching over to Associated Press.
All right, okay, so from what I can tell, we have only the early vote in for Essex, and in there, Betty Lou DeCroce, as you might expect, is leading in first place, was 41% of the vote, to Barranco's 13% of the vote. In fact, Barranco's in fourth place in Essex County behind some rando, Thomas Mastrangelo or something. Meanwhile, in Morris, Betty Lou DeCroce is at 14% of the vote to Barranco's 32%. So you can really see the effect of the line.
This is what we expected, but if the line holds up, and again, the election day vote is going to be the kingmaker in this district since we just have VBM votes at this point. But it really doesn't matter how much DeCroce wins Passaic and Essex by. The biggest thing here is she has to do well in Morris. She has to do extremely well in Essex and Passaic, and arguably either finish ahead of Barranco and Morris or finish slightly behind him to really have a chance at winning.
Yeah, looking at the particulars here, although overall she's only losing by 1%, her odds are much, much longer than that suggests, because currently, to get a sense of the district, there are 121 precincts in Morris, only 29 in Essex, and 13 in Passaic. Only 5% of Morris County's precincts have reported so far. So there's a lot more Morris coming in, and in Morris, Barranco is leading DeCroce by 17%.
Yeah. And looking at some of these other races, we had a comment, will Hirsch sing, sue, or demand a recount again? No, I don't think so, because his position was never credible to begin with last time, but even in the minds of his supporters, he lost to Rick Maida by about 2.5% last time. That's a much more credible position from which to argue the election was stolen than finishing in third place and trailing the front runner by like 25 points. I mean, it's as simple as that. He'll say whatever he wants, but just like last time, the courts will treat it as utter nonsense, and he will be forced to concede.
To be clear, the only time when you could even remotely say fraud might have affected the outcome is if your outcome is within like 0.2% or something. Those are the only times when ballot irregularities generally ever like affect the vote. Otherwise, you're just being dumb.
Yes, it would make – I could understand fraud arguments on both sides in a race like the 2nd Congressional District in Iowa, for example, because Marietta Miller Meeks won by 5 or 6 votes. Then I personally think the election result is the election result, even in a race like that specific race in particular. But, if Hirsch Singh somehow lost by 6 votes out of couple thousand, okay, maybe that's more credible. Although still, I don't really buy into his claims at all, ever. In fact, it looks like Chitterelli's going to sweep all the counties here. I mean, Cape May's gone. There's no chance of Singh winning that at this point. And Atlantic County is more than half in at this point. I just don't see a chance for Singh there anymore, given his position at the moment. Reviewing some of these legislative races, in the 2nd district, we projected Vince Palestina will win that primary and advance to the November election. He currently leads 68-32 with 62% of the vote reporting. In the 16th district, we projected Mike Pappas will advance with 46% of the precincts reporting according to the AP. The former congressman leads 63-37. That's another successful instance of the line. We're still waiting on the Senate primary in District 18 between Patrick Deignan and Mohan Patel. Controversial in his own right, part of the Edison 8. We're going to have to see how successful that challenge is. My guess is not particularly successful, given the fact that another race here in the 20th with 42% in, Jamel Hawley, also a controversial candidate for the Democrats, failed to really make it a close race at all against Joe Cryan, even as a minority candidate in the majority minority district represented by a white Democrat. Cryan's winning with almost 65% of the vote there at the moment. In the 24th district, Stephen Orojo, as we projected earlier, still maintaining an easy lead with 75% of the vote reporting over Daniel Cruz. In the 28th district, Ronald Rice easily cruising to re-election, essentially de facto re-election, if you want to call it that, although that's just the primary. And then in the 37th district, the other close race we were watching, Jamal Hawley, I mean, for whatever's due to him in terms of respect, came a lot closer to beating Joe Cryan than Valerie Huddle has come to beating Gordon Johnson here. Because if you think about it, Gordon Johnson's winning essentially 75-25. That's a far more lopsided margin by about another 10 points when compared against the 20th Senate District. And that's with 38% reporting in. And Ethan, do you want to run us through the assembly results at all on the AP? I'm not sure if Ethan's there, so let's do our quick update here. So essentially what we're really watching in the assembly tonight, still watching, I should say. First off, the 13th district, so one of the ones we called already, 97% is reporting there. It's Monmouth County based. Serena DeMasso, one of the incumbents there, was not given the line after a falling out with Sean Golden, who is in charge of the Monmouth County Republican organization. Holmdel Education, Board of Education member Vicki Flynn was given the other line spot there, in addition to fellow incumbent Gerard Scharfenberger. Scharfenberger finishes first with 36.5%, Flynn in second with 35.98%, and DeMasso unfortunately losing, although still a fairly credible performance from off the line with 27.5%. And again, the 13th, 97% reporting, that's significantly more than any other of these assembly or Senate districts tonight. Looking at some of the other races, the 16th was decided, and the results in the 18th district, again, as well, look fairly good. The 20th district, it looks like one incumbent, Annette Quijano, is going to advance, along with Reginald Atkins, who is in second with 34.17% of the vote. Looking at some of the other results here, in the 21st district, Michelle Matsakudis and Nancy Munoz both won easily in the 21st district and are advancing to the general election. The 30th decided. The 31st is decided because, Chiara Velati. Actually, no, the 31st is, yes, the 31st is effectively decided because Chiara Velati suspended his campaign a couple weeks ago. So William Sampson is continuing there. 37 is decided. So really the only two races we're looking at, first off, 39, Bob Auth and Deanne DeFuccio, both leading John Azaridi and John Kirpus, although they were both good fundraisers. And they're not doing horribly, but at this point, they're not close enough with 40% in to really justify continuing this race. And we're going to project both Auth and DeFuccio winners. So Shapisi and Auth are going to continue their hidden beef. And while Shapisi will be going on to that Senate race where she is a favorite, Authen DeFuccio will fight on another day and live to continue fighting another day after John Azaridi and Jonathan Kirpus failed to win there. And finally, I'm going to throw it over to Ethan for an update in District 26 because it looks like DeCroce has sunk slightly behind Barranco with 13% in. This is really the last competitive race we're covering tonight, the last one.
Yep. And here there's just been a drop of some more Morris ballots, although it's gone from 5% reporting to 17% reporting, and already you can see just from that the Barranco's lead has extended by 4 points. He now leads 25.6% to DeCroce's 20.3%. And as Morris, there's still literally 100 more precincts in Morris left, and he's still leading by 10% over DeCroce. So as these drop in, we expect Barranco's lead to just increase. And even though she has a line in Essex and Passaic, and there's still all their election day precincts are still out, it's probably not enough. You can't call it yet because maybe she absolutely crushes it in like Passaic and stuff and like carries her over, but otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, and again, I mean, she could get 70% in Essex and Passaic, but if you're finishing in third, that's a failure essentially. In Morris, that's not enough to win. And it's really just waiting now. This is our last race. We're going to be wrapping up the stream tonight after this, and we'll be publishing full election results on the Elections Daily page for New Jersey. I'm going to compile them once we're done and we get everything, all the unofficial results in and certified, and we'll be releasing that, and then we're supposed to be going on to the general election.
Well, a fun fact about this district, LD26. In fact, just a fun fact in general about these races, a lot of these districts, LD26 in 2020 was only Trump 3, yet we rated it as safe Republican because these Central Jersey, as we mentioned before, these Central Jersey, North Jersey districts are way more Republican down ballot. So our sort of reasoning is, well, if not even Biden can win these districts, then the New Jersey Democrats on a state level race, they have pretty much no chance of winning here. And so therefore, that's why, despite it being a narrow district on paper for a state legislative race in North Jersey, they've got no shot here.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, they've just now started contesting LD21, Tom Kaine's old district, which is like Biden plus 18 or something. Tells you about the North Jersey Democrats. LD39, where we're having the other primary that we just called, Biden plus 4.6%. We think Republicans are likely, they're pretty favored to hold these. There's slightly less ticket splitting up in Bergen, but still quite a bit.
And again, we're not really seeing any changes to our ratings right off the bat just from these results. We didn't really see any upsets.
Yeah.
In fact, I think some of us might have expected DeCroce to perform worse overall, although we're still waiting on Morris to come in. In all likelihood, DeCroce will continue to sink further down in that race. Certainly, DeMasso will finish off with a more respectable performance as a losing incumbent. Or I should say, we can say that with more certainty at this point. And also, this rando, as we said, Thomas Mastrangelo, however you say his name, did not expect him to take 17% of the vote.
If I had to guess, that probably hurt Christian Barranco.
Probably. I mean, if you want to look at it on the county level, let's see. I mean, Essex is 27% in. DeCroce isn't even winning Essex, so it's not like she's sweeping this stuff. Morris, again, most of the precincts are in Morris, and DeCroce is in third. In fact, in all likelihood, DeCroce could very easily be taken over by Thomas Mastrangelo here, who is only 2 votes behind DeCroce in Morris County. And that would be pretty embarrassing. At that point, it doesn't really matter how Passaic goes, given the fact that Passaic has an even smaller share of the vote than Essex. Although the Essex line going to DeCroce certainly explains why DeCroce is in second place right now, although Jay Weber is still leading at the moment.
Just a note on the gubernatorial primary. I know I said while I don't think turnout in primary really reflect much about the general election. Obviously, the specific results in the primaries can reflect certain things about the general election, and if I'd say that Jack might have a bit of catching up to do with the MAGA base right now. He has if there's a decent number of people who've decided not to vote for him despite being on the line here, and he's probably going to need to make, if he wants any chance of winning New Jersey, even in the blue state, he's still going to need his the base of Republicans to want to turn out for him for an off-year election.
Yeah.
So we'll see how he handles that while continuing to hone a moderate image, moderate enough to win as a Republican in New Jersey.
And again, we're really just watching this race. I mean, Wildstein just confirmed what we projected earlier with Bob Oth and Deanna Fuccio winning. So at the end of the day, this is the last race to watch. And I'd say that we can probably call it once we get a little bit more of the vote in Morris.
Yeah. If Morris continues coming in and she's still losing it by more than 10 points there, you can probably call it.
Yeah. Overall, that would mean that 2 incumbents have lost, both Republicans.
Yeah.
Both ultimately because of changes to the line in electorally significant ways.
Yeah.
Overall, the line's held up.
Yeah. Notably, DeCroce is losing by I think, to be exactly 9.7 in Morris, and she's only winning in Essex by 9.4. So she's not even winning in the county she has the line by more than she's losing in the county where she doesn't have the line. So, yeah.
Yeah, and again, even in Essex, where she did have that single line, because Weber was dropped from the line in Essex and Passaic for supporting the Barranco coup in, as I like this name, Crucial Morris County. Pretty funny. So thank you, Miles, for that one. But yeah, even then, not leading in Essex at the moment, in a second place spot at 29.5%. But yeah, Crucial Morris couldn't be a better way to describe it. I mean, when you lose the line in the county that makes up 75% of your district and the bulk of the Republican primary vote, and then you're essentially about to finish behind the equivalent of a rando candidate that didn't get any attention behind or before tonight, that's very bad news. So we should be projecting the race pretty soon. I'd like to see maybe 30% of the vote in Morris, and if it stays the same or gets worse, then we'll have an outcome and we'll be able to wrap up and start looking for final results that we can publish for you guys as soon as the results are certified in a week.
Yo, Harrison, let's play a game. In 2017, Phil Murphy lost Morris County by 8% to Kim Guadagno. In 2021, what do you think? What would you rate Morris County as in terms of which party it will go to? Lean R, toss up. Yeah.
I mean, given how well the Democrats did in Morris relative to 16 in the 2020 presidential race, somewhere between toss-up and lean Republican, given that it's an off-year election.
Going to use the forbidden tilt rating that apparently doesn't is. Was it taboo?
I'm not confident enough to say either way, so I guess I'd have to pick it as a toss-up.
Yeah. If I had to choose one, I would choose lean Republican, but yeah, I'd say somewhere between those two. 8 points is a lot to make up, and yeah, I guess Morris. How did Morris trend? Let me think about that.
Morris was good for Biden. We do have a question here again from Miles. Any chance Murphy carries New Jersey 2 again? That's actually a very interesting question. So
I think he's favored to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting because Chitterelli is from North Jersey. And if you look at the election last time, it's really hard to say because there's such a big discrepancy in New Jersey between the federal level and the down ballot. I mean, you generally see Democrats holding on to their ancestral heritage in the South and the state level, whereas Republicans are generally stronger up north. But even then, you've seen trends from the federal level seeping down. So New Jersey too will be close. But ultimately, if Chitterelli loses by the same margin as Guadagno, I think it's possible that Murphy carries NJ2 again. If it's closer, then New Jersey 2 will certainly be up for grabs. If they had nominated a candidate from South Jersey that had been incredible, then I don't think so. But again, if Chitterelli goes down the same path as Guadagno and Phil Murphy really does become the first governor here to win in 44 years as a sitting Democrat, then he might honestly win by that typical inelastic 57-41 range margin. What do you think?
I think for the overall margin, probably just because it's New Jersey, somewhere between four. In a typical race, it's probably going to be like 13 to 16% win for Murphy. If Chitterelli runs a great campaign, he can potentially make it closer, or we'll see, or the environment turns much worse, and Phil Murphy for some reason raises taxes, he could even win. Otherwise, I think I'd say Murphy's probably favored to win New Jersey second, just because it was close in 2020. Trump only won it by less than 3 points, so it wouldn't take that much of a down ballot down ballot effect for Phil Murphy to carry the district. And then he'll probably lose the third district. It's just because that's more suburban. But funny enough,
hear from David Wildstein as well that Parsippany Troy Hills, which is the Morris County municipality in which DeCroce lives, is not actually reporting yet, so that could be a little bit of a benefit in Morris County. We've seen more coming in Essex County, and Weber's still leading. But Morris, we have not had an update yet. And Passaic, everything's still out. So compared to the other assembly races, this one's going pretty slow.
Real random thing. In 2017, both candidates, although Phil Murphy was also from Monmouth County, his opponent Kim Guadagno, before becoming lieutenant governor, was I believe the sheriff from Monmouth County, and
yes,
that in my opinion, almost certainly contributed to the fact to why he lost Monmouth by 13%. I expect that to be, not 13%, by 12%. I expect him to do much better in this year, even if he's going to lose it. Democrats never win Monmouth. They'll get close. They'll never win it.
Another interesting piece of trivia, Kim Guadagno was also the first governor of New Jersey that was the first lieutenant governor of the state of New Jersey. The second currently is Sheila Oliver, and Jack Chitterelli will also be able to select his lieutenant governor nominee soon, now that he has won the primary. But previously, the president of the state senate would act as lieutenant governor. And that's how you saw someone like Donald DeFrancesco take over and essentially lead the state through 9/11 as Senate president, but also exercising the role as governor. And they created that lieutenant governor's office during the Christie administration, and Kim Guadagno became the first lieutenant governor of New Jersey. But again, as I said earlier, very hard to defeat incumbents in this state. We haven't had a governor defeated here as an incumbent since 1973, when Republican Governor William Cahill lost to Charles Sandman, a South Jersey congressman. I think he was from Cape May County or Cumberland County. And we haven't had a senator lose a primary since 78, when liberal Republican Clifford Case, who, like I mentioned, was almost certainly more liberal than many conservative Democrats, particularly those from the South that were in the Senate at the time. And he lost narrowly to Jeff Bell, who, interestingly enough, Jeff Bell came back in 2014 and lost a Senate race against Cory Booker. And that race ultimately yielded a victory to Democrats and allowed Bill Bradley to start his career. So again, compared to other states, and House not a redistricting primary. We've had two recently, but just an example of a U.S. representative from New Jersey losing a primary in a regular year to another candidate. I don't think it's happened since the 1930s, almost 100 years ago. I can't even remember ever reading about something like that happen. I mean, it's happened in general elections, but losing just a regular primary compared to other states is basically unprecedented in New Jersey.
Yeah. Gotta love the machine here. So,
yeah.
Although funny enough, I was just thinking about how some of our recent candidates in New Jersey, if like for the House, aren't really products of the machine this time. So like Andy Kim, him only moved back to New Jersey a year before he ran for Congress. So he and Malinowski, same for like Malinowski and Cheryl. I don't believe they had deep ties to the machine beforehand, before they ran.
No, and in many respects, the machine is much more of an animal of the primary campaign, if you will. If you look at it, we've had incumbents defeated all the time in New Jersey House races, in wave years and the like, or if they get into a scandal. It's just less common in the actual primary. So if anything, I think the line really matters in the primary, because voters in the primary will say, here's the line, here's the candidate endorsed by my party organization. This looks like the most credible thing. Let me vote for it, not these other Democrats that may be running off the line or other Republicans running off the line. Whereas in a general election, you have Republicans and you have Democrats, and none of these individuals is going to, at least in most cases, vote for the other party in that race. I mean, that's pretty much common sense. You have the group of independent swings, but not overall. Oh, here's a good question.
Although New Jersey did still see like quite a bit of ticket splitting this decade, even last year.
I know what you mean. I'm just saying you always have that third of voters that make or break. So Miles has a question. Would you say Malinowski's stock trade news makes it more likely for Dems to push to concede his seat? So I just will give my 2 cents and then tell Ethan. So personally, what I think is going to happen with redistricting now, the commission, ultimately the final member, is chosen by the state Supreme Court, which is controlled by Democratic appointees. So what I think is going to happen,
it's controlled by Republican appointees at the moment. But
sorry, yeah. But my point is, I think it's very likely that they chop up Malinowski's seat and shore up Gottheimer and Cheryl, because if Malinowski's looking like he's just going to lose a competitive seat or a Democratic seat to Tom Kean in 2022, I think they might figure, why don't we spend more time drawing a map that's more favorable for our Democrats like Cheryl and Gottheimer, who stand a chance at really making a long-term career out of their House tenures. And I think that's what they're going to do. And they'll draw a seat that someone like Tom Kean could win and effectively have, at least not safe as in safe on paper for the Republicans, because it would continue to trend toward the Democrats, but certainly a seat that Tom Kean would be relatively safe in 2022, 2024, 26, at least for the foreseeable future within the next half decade or so.
Yeah. Currently, the state Supreme Court is partisan composition is 4-3 Republican. Technically, it's 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and 1 independent, but the independent is widely considered to be a Republican. However, that independent is retiring. Is retiring in about 2 months, and will be due to be replaced by Phil Murphy with a Democrat. So I'm not sure when the Supreme Court will choose the tiebreaker, or maybe the commission members are able to agree among themselves who the tiebreaker will be. So timing might matter there. But yeah, as for the ultimate question of whether Malinowski's stock news will make it more likely Dems will concede a seat, it very well could be. So I've heard conversation even before the stock news came out that they might do something like that. Maybe not make it like a winnable seat, but maybe their proposed map would make it something that Kean would almost certainly win in 22, but they'd have a shot at winning in 24, because Malinowski severely underperformed, and he only won by like 1%.
1 point. It was like a 10-point underperformance.
Yeah, and 2022 is almost certainly going to be a redder environment than that. with the same opponent, they were thinking, okay, well, we wanted because the commission, the redistricting commission in New Jersey is weird. I like the way I've always described it is a redistricting game of chicken. Because what happens is the two parties make their maps, and then they present it to the tiebreaker, and then the tiebreaker has to choose one of them. And in general, they choose the one that's less gerrymandered. So both parties try to gerrymander as much as possible while being less gerrymandered than the other party's map, so that the tiebreaker would choose their map, and then they win redistricting. Last decade, this resulted in Democrats winning the map for the legislature, and Republicans winning the map for the House. So part of their efforts to win that game of chicken, they might try to draw a more Republican leaning seat there, so that the tiebreaker might choose their map, because they might think, oh, no Republican seats in North Jersey might seem a bit unfair, and they'll choose the other map. So that's sort of how it might work.
Either way, Malinowski's in trouble.
Yeah, I'd say if I had to choose a winner, I'd say Kane's probably going to win that seat, 22.
Yeah, I think it was smart of him to retire. But I think we're approaching the end of tonight's stream. We'll keep you updated on Twitter with the results of the 26th district here, but Morris appears to be really slow, and I don't really see a point in keeping everybody on here waiting until we get the results. So we'll have a projection out later, and we'll release the full results later this week. So thank you again so much, guys, for being on and staying with us, and have a good night.
All right, see ya.